This is a unit that riffs on some of the Talmud pieces that were explored in 2026's Project Zug with a bunch of you. And this is exploring intention in general, the idea of intention. And the title of the unit is, But I Really Didn't Mean It. Here we go. So I would begin by kind of asking the question of what's the problem with the idea when someone says, I didn't really mean to do it, right? And to me, the idea is the problem is that we as an outside judger of the statement don't really believe him or don't know what kind of evidence we need to see in order to believe that's true. This is something that's going on in his head that can only really be judged by this person. So how do we say, oh yes, he's telling the truth? Or how do we say, no, actually, he's not telling the truth? Then the second question is, does our judgment of the statement change depending on the it, right? If it's a small level, I took a pencil from someone versus I killed someone, is there a difference in our outside judgment of belief or not belief? Okay, those are two good questions to talk about first. And then we go to the, and kind of just mentioning that the Torah is going to answer this question by dealing with, on the spectrum of small it to the worst it, it's going to deal with the worst it, right? Killing. And if you kill someone and you say, I really didn't mean it. So we're going to explore the idea of arei miklat, or cities of refuge. And here are some terms that will help everyone kind of get into the, right, the more that we use these terms, the Hebrew terms of ir miklat, arei miklat, kohen gadol, goel ha'adam, galut, we'll get better at, it will feel more authentic as a unit. And so just so we know, the idea when we say the word galut, even though today it means exile, like galus or galut, when we say galut in the story, it means that you have to go to the city of refuge. So first of all, just trying to understand the idea of refuge in a larger sense. What does that actually mean? So here's a definition of that. And then just some questions about what you might do as a class to explore the idea of what does it mean, a city of refuge? What might that mean? And this just kind of gets the schema kind of what this might all be about. Okay. We have two places in the Torah that talk about the Ir Miklat, Numbers and Deuteronomy. And here are some questions to answer as our students read these two pieces, right? Who gets in and who doesn't get in? What elements make it a place of protection? And what elements make the Ir Miklat a place of punishment? And it's important to kind of notice that there are elements of each. Okay, so here are the two readings and from the Torah, and here are at least the Torah takeaways. One is the unintentional murder is protected if you can get to an Ir Miklat. If the Goel Hadam gets you there first, tough luck, gets to you first, tough luck. Once you get to the Ir Miklat, you must stay until the death of a Kohen Gadol. And so we see that there are parts of this that feel like protection, parts of it that feel actually like punishment. And that's where we are left off when we get to our first Mishnah source. And the Mishnah presents two cases, and they actually are the exact same case with only one variable, right? And the case is as follows, right? Someone has a yellow, is working the pulley system. Someone has a yellow block in that pulley system. It slips and it kills, okay? That's the scenario. The one difference in these two scenarios are that for one of them, the pulley is being pulled up, and for one of them, the pulley is being let down. Okay, the block is being pulled up or let down. And what the Mishnah is going to tell us is, well, first of all, let's think about, according to Galut, according to the Torah, which of these cases goes to Galut? And I think what we should be able to show is both of these seem like unintentional murder, right? It slipped in both cases. It fell in both cases. Both cases seem unintentional. In both of these cases, you go to galut. Okay? The Mishnah doesn't see it that way. And by learning about what the Mishnah says, we're going to get a whole different idea of what galut really is all about. So, according to the Mishnah, one of these cases, I'm not going to tell you which, the person goes to galut. One of these cases, a person doesn't need to go to galut. Okay? And let me just say the person doesn't need to go to galut. So first of all, we're going to try to have the kids try to figure this out. Which case does a person holding a pulley need to go to an Ir Miklat? In which case does the person holding the pulley not need to go to an Ir Miklat? Okay? And by the way, what does it mean not to go to an Ir Miklat? It means that, yeah, well, I don't think, no, we should answer that question quite yet. Okay. But I have some hints, because this is kind of a hard question. We had a hard time when we were studying this. But here's hint number one. In which case is the yellow box not doing what the guy wants it to be doing? And, okay, so that's question number one. Number two is, if not doing what I want the yellow box to be doing equals it's not in my control, then which case might actually be a case that is beyond the control of the guy who's working the pulley? And here is another way to think about it that might help us out. Another way to think about it is, how would, in case one, how would this person prove that he never intended this to happen? How would person number two prove that he never intended this to happen? And which is harder to prove? And did you figure it out? Which one of these is a person? Okay. And here we can answer, right? So, and here is the answer. This person does not need to go to galut. Oh, this person does not, and this person does need to go. So here we have kind of something that we can try to answer. Unintentional, and now this guy must, what? Run to the city of refuge. And this one, unintentional, and now the guy must do nothing. He's 100% innocent. So if the kids can answer that, then they're really on the first step to kind of really understanding what's going on here. And then we get that great rule from the rabbis: anything on its way down, if that kills, you go to the city of refuge. Anything on its way up that falls down, it goes to, right, anything that kills not in the direction, anything that kills with an object that is not in the direction of going down, that killer is 100% free. Okay? And, right. Okay. So this is an interesting thing. If we compare the Mishnah and the Talmud, the Torah and the Mishnah, we realize that here we have a case where the Torah is saying, in every single case, you go to the Ir Miklat. In every single case of unintentional killing, you go into this city of refuge. The Mishnah says something very different. The Mishnah says, if it's a true case of 100% beyond my control, that's called unintentional, and you are completely innocent. You do not need to go to an Ir Miklat. But in case number two, when your dropping of that thing was in some way something that you may have had some control over, there's an eensy-beensy little bit of neglect that you have. You are kind of still, even though it was unintentional, you're a little responsible. And because of that, you go to the Ir Miklat. So now all of a sudden, because of this, the Ir Miklat is changed into something that is not refuge, not complete protection, but is actually a place where you're being punished a little bit, right? And since the Torah had these two elements, we kind of want to know, well, which element does the Mishnah pick up on? And it picks up on the Ir Miklat being more of a place of punishment, because you should have watched out. You should have been more careful. But when it's not under your control, you are free to keep on living, free to go. Okay? And so here's kind of a summary of the Torah and the Mishnah here. Okay. Now we get to our next Mishnah. And the next Mishnah presents 5 cases in which someone, in which we're asking the question, does this person have a little bit of neglect, and do they need to go to the Ir Miklat? Or are they 100%, this was 100% out of their control, and they are innocent? I would recommend kind of giving this to the kids in a worksheet to see if they can figure it out maybe in Chavruta, and then go over with the answers. So in case number 1, I threw a rock into the street and it killed someone. Is this kind of neglect or beyond your control? Oh, it's kind of neglect. Case number 2, case number 3, case number 4, case number 5. Now, each of these cases obviously give opportunity for kids to stop and talk about this before you give the answer that the Mishnah gave. Okay. Good. Okay. So here we're going to get now to the first moment where we're going to see Talmud. And the question is, what will the Talmud add to the conversation, right? We see the Torah saying one thing. We see the Mishnah saying another thing. And the question is, what will the Talmud do? And here is what the Talmud is going to do in this case. The Talmud is going to look at case number 1, and they're going to wonder about case number 1, right? They're going to say, wait a second. That case, all right, is kind of like this. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. Here's this person throwing a brick into the public area where people are. And anyone who looks at this, would we believe this person or not? Of course we wouldn't believe them. Look, they see people there. They see exactly what's going to happen. Don't think that in this case, it's not beyond our control. It's totally in our control. And it's not kind of neglect. It's actually serious neglect, right? It is gross negligence. So the Talmud is going to ask the question, how can you say that this first case is a case of kind of negligence? So you go to Galut. No, this should be a case of this would be a case of calling this person a murderer. It's not kind of neglect. This is a murderer. This person should be killed outright, never getting to go to Galut. And what is the Talmud? So what's the Talmud going to do? So this is interesting. The Talmud is going to do the following, right? So first it starts with this question. If you throw a rock into the street, that is so much more than being a little negligent. That's being 100% guilty. So the Talmud's going to do the following. It's going to say, the Mishnah said something, and it doesn't seem logical. The Mishnah can't be wrong. The Talmud, are going to try to figure out how to defend the Mishnah. And the Talmud is going to get very creative in its defense of the Mishnah, because the Talmud is going to try to find us a case where someone indeed is dealing with a rock that's in some way placed or thrown or put in the street, and dealing with that rock that kills someone, and it's not gross negligence, but just kind of negligent, which would make you go to Galut. So again, the first statement says that can't be true. And the Talmud is going to take 4 steps in order to do it. So this might be a helpful place to get people to try to figure this out. What are the steps the Talmud might take to prove that this act is an act of kind of negligence? And the Talmud is going to give us 4 kind of steps in trying to prove it. Okay? And of course, if you know Shakla Vataria, you're going to know one of the reasons for 4 steps and not 1 step is, after each step, the Pong side is going to come back and say, no, that doesn't work. No, that doesn't work. Okay, and then we have another, no, it doesn't work. And at the end, we actually see it does work, right? There's an answer that does work. So what are 4 ways that we could try in some way to show that throwing a rock into the street and having it kill someone is not gross negligence, but just an incy-bincy piece of being negligent? Okay, so here we go. So here are the steps that the Talmud is going to do. So after the kids figure out and try to come up with some ideas. So 1, the Talmud is going to look at the action itself and say, you thought that person was throwing into the street, but is he really throwing? Are you sure about that? Number 2, look at the time of day that this person is throwing or dealing with this stone. Is this a time of day where a lot of people are around? Or number three, geographical. Look at where the item is being thrown. Is that a place where a lot of people are? And then number four, look at the relationship that people have to the place where the items are being thrown. So these four steps. Now I'm going to show how it's used in the Talmud itself. So I'll show you here's what we need and how the Talmud uses this idea. Again, so you can you can do this in any number of ways. You can maybe have all of these or kind of go through them in one step and have kids write it down as you go if you want, or something like that. Okay, so here is the first thing. I wasn't really throwing those stones. They just kind of fell as I was doing something. And how does the Talmud use that idea? It says, I was dismantling a wall and the stone just kind of fell and killed someone. Step number two. I wasn't really throwing those stones. They just kind of fell as I was doing something at a time when not many people are around. So now we've added an element to show that that this isn't gross negligence. It's kind of negligent, right? How does it play itself out? It's going to say I was dismantling a wall at night, and the stone just kind of fell and killed someone. But normally people aren't around at that point. Then this one, which is really interesting, says I wasn't really throwing those stones. They just kind of fell as I was doing something at a time when not many people are around, and it was in a place where people never, ever go. And so how does the Talmud use this? It says, oh, I was dismantling a wall at night, and the stone just kind of fell into a trash dump where people never are, and it killed someone, right? And now the Talmud, interesting enough, in this case, is going to say, well, wait a second. If it's a place where people never are, then that was beyond your control, meaning you should be 100% free. So now we have to kind of draw it back a little bit, and because that wouldn't agree with the top of the Mishnah, because Mishnah wants to say kind of negligence, so good galut. I wasn't really throwing those stones. They just kind of fell out as I was doing something at a time when not many people are around, in a place where people do not usually go, but sometimes they actually are there, meaning normally they wouldn't be there, but sometimes they are there. So I should have taken a little bit of precaution. Okay, good. So we have it. And how is that played out in the Talmud? I was dismantling a wall, and the stone just kind of fell off into the trash dump where people normally do not go. But sometimes people do use that area as a bathroom at night. But it was during the day, and so usually, right. And so I would have thought that I wouldn't have to even be worried about it, but people were actually using it. Okay. So you see, we've gotten to a place where actually now we have a case of the rock being in the street. It kills someone, but that negligence is not a gross negligence anymore. We've dialed it back so the Mishnah actually could make sense after all. We basically narrowed it to a place of like, this was actually almost beyond your control, but not completely beyond your control. Meaning you should have paid a little more attention. You are a little itty bitty bit negligent. You have to go into galut. You have to go to an ir miklat. Okay, and here if you want to look at kind of the pong sides, here I've listed that here. If you want, and you can even go into the Talmud piece here and show them it through. Okay, the next Mishnah that we're going to deal with, and here I'm just kind of putting up the questions. Because I think they're really fun to discuss, and you can kind of give some of the answers. But if a blind person kills, can we ever say that it's their fault? And this is, I think, a great question to follow. Because again, we're asking the question, are they kind of negligent, or for a blind person, is it 100% innocent all the time? Right? And what about this question? If a known enemy kills, can we ever say that she did it unintentionally, right? If I have an enemy and I kill them, can I say, I didn't mean it? Or is an enemy, because of the stance they are vis-a-vis you, are they is it always some intentionality behind that? These are good questions to ask, because we're trying to kind of make some kind of hard and fast rules. I don't think it's worth going into the Mishnah here, the Talmud pieces here, but I think these are like the larger questions that are brought up in the Mishnah. Okay. And they're not even completely kind of come to conclusion in the Talmud. But one thing to ask is, are these actually the same question, or are they different questions, right? We think they're different questions, but maybe actually they are the same. One is talking about an internal, a physical disposition, that makes us a certain way, and the other one talks about an emotional disposition that makes us a certain way. And so maybe actually they're this exact same question. I'm not sure. Okay. So now we're going to go to our next Mishnah. And the next Mishnah brings up the idea of where we actually send the unintentional murderer who is a little bit negligent, right? And we're going to name actually those cities of refuge, the 6 of them, okay? And the Talmud basically decides that this is a good opportunity to start talking about those cities. And remember, we asked the question before, where's the Talmud going to stand on the issue of the Torah says city of refuge has elements that are kind of punishment, kind of protection. The Mishnah says actually no, the city of refuge is really a place of punishment. And then where's the Talmud going to kind of come out on this issue? So one thing you need to know about the Talmud, and I know your kids have probably seen this before, but it's important to kind of mention here, because we have one thing about the Mishnah that we know is the Mishnah is oral law written down. But of course, that oral law written down was written by an editor who basically decided that some stuff gets in and some stuff doesn't get in. So what about that stuff that doesn't get in? Is it like thrown into the trash? Well, it's actually not thrown into the trash. It's placed in this book called the Tosefta, and in that book called the Tosefta, oops, what am I doing here? Sorry. In this book called the Tosefta, there are a lot of different laws, and one thing we're going to see is even though Rabbi Yehuda Nasi discards it and puts it in this other collection, it finds its way back into the Mishnah. And because the people who are talking in the Mishnah view it as important, as significant, as authoritative as the Mishnah, right? They're saying, Rabbi Yehuda, you don't get to choose what's more important and what's not. We're going to choose that, and we're going to look at that. So look at what the Talmud does here. It says these things right here. It's in a book called the Tosefta, but each individual law is called a baraita, things that are outside of the Mishnah, from that Talmudic word bara, right? Bara, which means outside. Okay, so we're going to start our study of the Talmud by the Talmud bringing up a baraita, something that was in this kind of stuff that Yehuda Nasi did not pick. And here it is right here. It says, these cities of refuge, make them in, and by the way, before you even do this, it might be helpful to say, oh, actually, what we're going to be talking about, what the Braita is going to talk about, is to describe what this city of refuge looks like. And you might want to say to these kids, okay, let's imagine this city of refuge. You tell me what it looks like. So we've learned that at least according to the Torah, it is a place of protection and maybe a place of punishment. According to the Mishnah, it's certainly a place of punishment. So what's it going to look like? Okay? And because once you do that, once you get the kids to imagine this and even draw it out, now they're going to say, here is actually what it does look like, right? This is what the Braita says. And what they're going to see is, wow, that's actually a pretty good place. That's a place that I might actually want to live. This is a place that actually values the people living there. So what does the Talmud do? So first of all, we're starting to get kind of a sense of, the Talmud has probably choices of what it can bring up. It brings up this Braita. Maybe it's trying to tell us that this place is not that bad, meaning the people in it are not that bad. Interesting. Okay. So what does the Talmud do next? So since this is a Braita, the Talmud wants to tell us that, by the way, these words, this law, is supported by a statement in the Torah. Okay? I mean, you might ask why that is, why it needs to do that, but we know that's one of the things that the Talmud does, right? The Talmud, like we saw before, tries to defend and explain the Mishnah, which it just did. In this piece of Talmud, we're trying to basically show how what's in the Mishnah or in the Braita or in oral law is connected and supported by the Torah itself. So we're getting kind of, that's one of the two aspects of, right, the Talmud really does two things, and we're seeing both of those things in play actually during this study. So we're getting support, and let's look at where that support's going to be. It's going to come from somewhere on this page, and you're going to want to give this page to your students and say, where on this page supports the Breita that was before, okay? And you're going to see that here it is right here. So the manslayer may live, flee there, and live. And, right, so there it is. There's the support from the Torah. And here's something really interesting. So basically, the manslayer is saying this is the kind of city, this is a place, if living is important, these are all these elements that we've listed here are ways that someone lives. Now, by the way, this was written a long, long time ago, so what you might want to ask your kids is, what would be the Breita that you think would have been written if this Breita was written today by you, right? What are the elements that you need in order to live, okay? And so they can kind of make their own Breita. In this case, that could be kind of fun, okay? Now, the Talmud also asks that question as well. But remember, they're not you, right? They're not a high school age, a teenager living in Orange County. These guys are rabbis who are writing this, and they're also thinking, and they're stroking their beards maybe and saying, what would I need to live? And you probably, like the Breita, listed a lot of material items that need to be there in this city for you to feel like I'm really living. And if those material items weren't there, right, if Netflix wasn't there, you'd be like, you know what, this is less of a life than I had hoped for. But if you're a rabbi stroking your beard, asking yourself, what do I need to live? They're asking about something that's not just material. They're going to say, in order to live, I don't just need the material, but I need the spiritual. And so that's why the Talmud is also going to ask that question, what does it mean to live? And they're going to come up with statements that start with the following. And your job as a student or to a teacher is to get your students to answer. If a student is sent to an Ir Miklat, this is what they need. If a Torah teacher is sent to an Ir Miklat, this is what they need. Okay, you can ask, right, what they think that is, and then you can give our answers. His Torah teacher goes with him. His entire school goes with him. And so at this point, basically, we actually can answer this question about the progression of someone from the Torah to the Mishnah to the Talmud, of what the Talmud has done, right? So the Torah starts out and saying, you know, if you're an unintentional murderer, you get sent to this place that's a little bit like punishment, a little bit like protection, okay? Or more like protection and a little bitty bit like punishment. The Mishnah says, no. If you are 100% unintentional murderer, you're free. If you have a little bit of negligence, you get sent to the city of refuge, and there you're basically held there because that's kind of a punishment because you should have been more careful. The Talmud in this case goes ahead and does what? The Talmud says that place that you're being sent to, that should be a quality place. That should be a place where you can live a life of meaning and fulfillment, right? Maybe not the most fulfilling, maybe not the most meaningful, but you can live there. You have all the stuff at your disposal for living a life, a spiritually meaningful, a physically meaningful as well. Okay. Now, this is the cool part about the Talmud. Sometimes the Talmud doesn't just stop here, because we could just stop right here. But the Talmud actually has two other very provocative things to say. But wait, there's more. So for each of these two statements, the Talmud's going to say something interesting that deserves our attention and unpacking. If a student is sent to an Ir Miklat, his Torah teacher goes with him. Rab Zera said, this is why a teacher needs to be very careful about the students that she decides to teach. Okay, there's a lot there. Like, what does this mean? And is this true? And what does this mean about how Rab Zera thinks about students in general? And what about the role that a teacher, right? Are students automatically horrible and never get better? And what about the role that a teacher needs to play in helping someone who might be Ir Miklat worthy, become non-Irmiklat worthy, right? What role does a teacher have to make people good? Do teachers play a role in that, or is that actually not true? And this feels like I'm judging someone from not what they might be, but who they were when they entered in. Like, what about a work in progress? Or what about, like, I'd like to take on the student because I believe they can be transformed in some way, right? There's a lot to talk about here, okay? The second case is also there's a lot to talk about, because what do we see here? We see a hugely problematic statement. If a Torah teacher is sent to an Ir Miklat, the entire school goes with him. But this brings up an idea that the rabbis of the Talmud are very uncomfortable with. What is a Torah? And see if they can figure this out on their own first. What is a Torah teacher doing in an Ir Miklat? How they did wrong to be sent there. Didn't their Torah teaching or Torah learning, didn't that protect them in some kind of significant way so they would not do bad? How can a Torah teacher do bad? Okay? So this is a really interesting question to bring up. It's so great, like the Talmud is actually asking itself about what is the power and the limits of the enterprise that they are 24/7 engaged in. Okay, and their answers are really interesting too. They give two answers. They say, yes, 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 Torah does protect. So actually the two answers they give are going to try really hard to protect the idea that study does protect you from bad. They're not willing to give up that idea at all. And they give two possible explanations for understanding what's going on here, why a Torah teacher could be punished and could do wrong, even though they're a Torah study teacher, and that shouldn't. So, idea number one, yeah, actually Torah does protect you as long as you're studying. But the moment that you're not studying anymore, boom, that's the moment that bad can happen. Okay, so that's number one. So that shows that yes, actually Torah does while you're studying, but you can't study 24/7, or if you can, then you're always protected. But there's going to be that moment where you're not. Number two, oh, actually, what the Torah is talking about, that the Torah does protect, but the kind of protection the Torah gives is against supernatural, cosmic hurt or cosmic bad things happening to you. But the stuff between you and other people, the Torah is not going to protect you from that. Okay? So once again, it says, yes, the Torah does protect, but protects in a different kind of way than you thought. Okay? And here's just a piece that you could use if you want to kind of get everyone to try to figure out what happens there. And then that's the end. That's the whole unit. I have a, right, there's a worksheet with this, and there's a slide deck.